There was a blessed elder man who was very fortunate. From a young age, Allah had chosen him as one of His special people. His parents had passed away when he was a child. When he grew up, he started keeping a few goats. Each day he would let them roam freely in the forest and would sit under a tree, absorbed in worship. Allah's power was such that no wild animals ever approached his goats. When the goats had eaten their fill, they would return to him and he would go back home before sunset. This pious man was used to doing all his work himself. He had a small home with 2 rooms and a big tree under which the goats would rest. In the evening, he would milk the goats, drink it warm, and thank Allah. Allah had provided enough sustenance through those goats, and his livelihood depended on them. Sometimes he would sell some goats, which kept his business running. People even called him a goat trader, as he was often engaged in buying and selling goats. One day, a young man came to him and said, "Your business is going well, you should get married so your home can be better managed." The elder agreed and married a pious woman. Both husband and wife would worship Allah together, and the elder continued doing his household chores himself. Although his wife offered to take over, he would reply, "Doing household work is a sunnah. I will follow the way of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in everything I do." He would often tell his wife, "Focus on worshiping Allah and praying 5 times a day." Their life continued in this way, and after 2 years Allah blessed them with a son. The boy was very dear to the elder, who raised him with great love. However, after the child was born, his wife's health declined, and eventually she passed away, returning to Allah. Now all responsibilities for his son fell on the elder. He took great care of his child, praying at night and looking after him during the day. Time passed, and his son grew up. The elder thought, "I should arrange my son's marriage and spend the rest of my life remembering Allah." He had no idea what lay ahead. He loved his son deeply and had never let him feel the absence of his mother. After arranging his son's marriage, he gave one of the 2 rooms to his son and daughter-in-law, while he continued his worship in the other room. After marriage, his son began working in the fields. Before leaving, he told his wife, "Take care of my father. He raised me with so much love, and now it's our duty to care for him. Remember, my father is devoted to worship. Do not disturb him during his prayers." With these words, the son went to the fields. For a few days, his daughter-in-law managed the household, cleaning, cooking, washing clothes, and doing dishes. Seeing this, the elder was very pleased and thanked Allah, feeling grateful that she was taking care of everything, allowing him more time for worship. One day, he performed ablution, took his prayer beads and the Holy Quran, and went to the forest with his goats. Then came a day when his daughter-in-law didn't come out of her room. The elder thought she might be unwell and thus couldn't make the morning meal. So he kneaded the dough, prepared bread, did the rest of the household chores, and then went to the forest as usual with his goats. When she woke up and saw that everything was done, she was pleased. But from that day onward, she grew accustomed to him doing all the chores quietly, while he continued his worship without ever expressing any complaints to his son or daughter-in-law. One day, the elder's son said, "Father, you don't need to go to the forest with the goats anymore. I'm here now. You should just stay home and worship." The elder replied, "Son, caring for goats is a sunnah, and doing my work with my own hands is also sunnah. That's why I do it." The son insisted, "But father, you're old now. Your hands aren't as strong as they used to be. When I was young, you fulfilled all my needs. Now you should rest." The elder had become quite weak from all the work and worship. One day, when his son was at the fields, he was resting in his room. As soon as he lay down, his daughter-in-law entered angrily and said, "Get up, enough resting. Come and do the housework. I've been waiting outside for this old man to get up and start working." The elder slowly got up and followed her outside, where she continued, "Wash these dishes, and after that, clean the entire house. How long will you keep eating for free?" Despite coughing, the elder began washing the dishes. She then placed a bucket of laundry in front of him. He started washing the clothes, but soon the time for prayer arrived. As he spread his prayer mat, his daughter-in-law angrily picked it up and threw it aside, saying, "What is this? Praying all the time? Just leave the work and see the state of your room." When the elderly man spread his prayer mat again, his daughter-in-law once more forced him to do chores. After washing clothes, he thought about offering his prayers, but she came back and ordered him, "I need fresh milk tea for the afternoon." The elderly man continued to do all the tasks silently, and whenever possible, he would secretly engage in worship. But this constant work and worship began to take a toll on his health. One night, he spent hours in prayer performing the Tahajjud and Fajr prayers, then engrossed himself in reciting the Quran. The intense work and worship weakened his body more and more each day. For 3 days straight, his routine was to worship at night and work all day. By the third day, while washing dishes, his weakness caused them to slip from his hands. Seeing this, his cruel daughter-in-law angrily threw more dishes towards him and said, "Clean these again. Are we animals to eat from dirty dishes?" Without a word, the old man gathered the dishes again and began to clean them. Suddenly, he felt dizzy and collapsed right on top of the dishes. His daughter-in-law didn't show any concern, instead trying to nudge him awake with her shoe. When he didn't respond, she grumbled, "This old man is always pretending," and walked off to her room. After a while, she heard the sound of the front door opening and rushed out to see. There she saw the old man still lying in the sunlight, his head resting on the dishes. When her husband arrived home, he ran over to his father and angrily asked his wife, "Why is Abu lying here on the dishes?" That night, the elderly man sat on his prayer mat, quietly making heartfelt prayers to Allah, expressing his helplessness and thinking that he was in a home where it was difficult to worship Allah. After the Tahajjud prayer, he picked up his prayer mat, his prayer beads, and the Holy Quran, and left the house, heading towards the forest. The Fajr call to prayer echoed through the air and he kept walking. A cool breeze brushed against him, and it felt like all of creation was glorifying Allah. The elderly man stopped at a spot and offered his Fajr prayer, then began reciting the Quran. As soon as he started, the birds on the trees fell silent, listening to his recitation. The scene was incredibly peaceful, with everything seeming to sing Allah's praises. After reciting for a long time, he noticed that the sun had risen and people had started their daily work. He didn't know exactly where he was, but he was at peace, feeling close to Allah, a peace he hadn't found at home. Word spread among the locals that this pious man had healing powers and helped people with his knowledge and prayers. Soon, people from the nearby areas started visiting him, seeking his prayers and blessings whenever they were sick or faced difficulties. He would always help them, solving their problems for Allah's sake, bringing blessings and peace to his small home. Everyone who visited felt a sense of divine mercy and tranquility. His sister also became a devoted worshipper, dedicating her life to Allah's worship. The elderly man brought a new light to this village, helping the people with his wisdom and prayers. He often advised them to trust in Allah, practice patience, and show gratitude. The villagers respected him deeply and sought his prayers. This way, he lived in this small village, continuously worshiping Allah and helping others. Despite his peaceful life there, his heart often thought of his son, worrying about him. He wondered how his son was managing with the harsh woman who had made life so difficult. He never wanted to leave his son, but he also didn't want to disrupt his son's household. He prayed constantly, asking Allah to bring happiness and peace to his son's life. Although he was respected and loved by the people in the village, his heart ached for his son, and every night during his Tahajjud prayer, he would pray that Allah ease his son's burdens and bring him comfort. Meanwhile, his son started realizing that his father had left because of his wife's cruel behavior. Each day, he became more aware of the damage she had caused in their home, likely pushing his father to leave. With their fields failing, livestock dying, and financial hardships worsening, his wife, once happy to be rid of the old man, started showing her true colors. She would scream at her husband daily, calling him useless and lazy, and began to reveal her selfish nature. He didn't help with any work, leaving life increasingly difficult for her husband. He couldn't focus on his farming, and the situation at home grew so bad that he felt mentally drained. Eventually, he became convinced that his wife was the true reason for his father's suffering. He recalled how his father was always devoted to Allah, never complained, and treated everyone kindly. Now, he had made up his mind to find his father and face the truth. Determined, he resolved to search for his father and ask for forgiveness. hoping that if his father returned, things at home might improve. After selling some goats, he eagerly anticipated meeting the pious elder he'd heard so much about, unaware that this very person was his own father. His father's life had changed. The pain and difficulties his daughter-in-law caused him had faded away with Allah's help. When the trader's sister, whom the elderly man had stayed with some time ago, met him again and saw his dedication and kindness, the elder asked her for her hand for his son. By Allah's grace, they were soon married, and his life found new peace. His new daughter-in-law was a kind and religious woman who managed her home well and was dedicated to spreading Islamic teachings. She even established a small school in her home where local children learned the Quran, with some becoming Hafiz. Now, peace and happiness had returned to the elder's life. His daughter-like daughter-in-law turned their home into a center for learning, and the entire family began living under the light of faith. Allah rewarded his patience and devotion, and he was now overjoyed with his renewed life. The story teaches us that patience, faith, and kindness are powerful virtues that can transform one's life, even in the face of hardship and injustice. The elder's steadfast devotion to Allah and his willingness to endure suffering without complaint ultimately led to peace and blessings. While his son's wife mistreated him, it was his faith that gave him strength and brought true fulfillment. This story reminds us that Allah always supports those who remain sincere, patient, and devoted in difficult times. Oppression and cruelty, on the other hand, bring eventual ruin and regret. It teaches us that by holding on to faith and treating others with kindness, we invite Allah's mercy, peace, and positive change into our lives.